I would have had this out sooner, but heat conditions in the summertime these days are less than stellar, to put it lightly. So I felt like now would be the right time to get myself back on track, starting with this, and it's pretty interesting to say the least. For those who know me well enough, it's no secret that Aqua Teen Hunger Force has always been one of my biggest sources of humor known to man. This incredibly bizarre show about talking fast food doing basically whatever the writers wanted them to do. It was essentially a no rules kind of show with little to no continuity whatsoever. And the stuff they got away with in an 11-minute time frame is off the charts. And if a character dies along the way, no big deal. They'll be back in the next episode as if nothing happened. It was so weird to watch, and yet I couldn't get enough of it. The show lasted for about 15 years, going from 2000 to 2015, lasted for over 100 episodes, and started changing their name on a yearly basis somewhere down the line. Their reason being, they were simply bored and wanted to spice things up a bit. After reaching that milestone, I wouldn't really blame them. Spawn, the movie release sometime during its lifespan, is rumored to get another major title under HBO Max sometime in the future, and at one point even had a video game tie-in, which is what we're going to be looking at today. This is Aqua Teen Hunger Force Zombie Ninja Pro-Am for the PlayStation 2. Released in 2007, developed by Create Studios and published by Midway Games, this game is a pretty weird amalgamation of golfing, combat, and racing. The golfing being the biggest selling point of the game. The concept I don't think is too far-fetched when you take into account Atari games like Zany Golf and Ninja Golf, which this game seems to be taking notes from. You play golf while fighting enemies along the way. I didn't even think you could make a video game around a show like Aqua Teen Hunger Force of all things, but I'm not one to reject the idea. In fact, it sounded cool at the time. However, I never imagined it turning out like this. Before I ramble on for too long here, let's get into what the actual game is about. The gist of it is Frylock gets a letter saying he'll be participating in the Jersey Pines golf course. Shake and Meatwad tag along, and from there, the game kicks off. You learn the basics of golf, cause property damage to Carl's house, steal his car, and it's off to the actual golf game. I'd imagine anyone who's ever played games like this would get a good idea of how the gameplay works. You play a couple rounds, scoring around the required par while avoiding hitting the green and getting into sand traps. It's basically your standard game of golf. The action outside of golfing has me split now that I'm here. The combat works as well as you'd expect. You walk along the course, attacking enemies coming your way, and search for all sorts of collectibles like the Engeladito chips that restore your health, Boxy Brown, which grants you a special cheat on a hole, floating golf balls that give you a mulligan in case you make a mistake, Old Drippy, who acts as your extra life system, and the fabled legendary Brood Witch. Collect enough of these and you'll unlock a special movie of sorts. I'd never managed to find any of these outside of the tutorial stage, so I'm best off just looking it up on YouTube or something. It's probably worth watching regardless. Returning to the gameplay, there's only so much you can do while exploring. There's no jumping or running mechanics of any kind, so your means of getting around is to slowly walk your way from one spot to another and catch up with the ball. I was tolerating this at the start, but halfway through was beginning to test my patience the further I went in. It also doesn't help that so long as the ball is within your field of range, you gotta take down every single enemy in sight before you can come close to resuming your progress. Adding on to this game's idea of difficulty seems to be spawning in a multitude of enemies in one spot, when in practice, all it really does is put me in cheap shot scenarios or just straight up frustrating and unfair in general. The only real way to get around this is to just pass the enemies and hope you're far enough from the action for the game to pick you back up. It's not impossible, in fact I've done this a number of times in the later half of the game, but the fact of the matter is the combat can get exhausting and wear on you pretty thin after some time has passed. One thing I do like is how you can play as Master Shake and Frylock at the press of a button. While Shake resorts to whacking things around with his many clubs, including this badass sword of his, Frylock specializes in using his special laser eyes on incoming enemies, and it actually feels pretty good to fire at baddies coming from a distance. You can even bring in Meatwad as live bait to distract enemies while you mercilessly wail on them. Speaking of, the enemies in this game boil down to the many side characters we come to see from the Aqua Teen series, namely the Talking Trees, Turkatron, Carl's many crabs. The wrench guys from Dusty Gazongas are here, the Love Mummy, Gorgatron. It's all pretty solid fan service if you know the show well enough. On a similar note, the writing in this game is about on par with the actual show itself.
Dear Frylock, we are coming to hurt you. You are rejected because you are a red gay ass.
It doubly helps that all the voice actors are here to reprise their roles, from Carrie Means to Dana Snyder to the legendary Dave Willis. There's also a handful of callbacks to the episodes within the series as well.
That's the Brood Witch, Shake. You remember what happened last time, right?
Nope.
Shake pudding brownies in Frylock's cloner, Meatwad's t-shirt of the dead, MCP pants in the depths of hell. That's all good stuff, which now that I think about it is always a plus for tying games like this. Even if the transition to 3D doesn't really look so hot on many of the characters present, though I don't know whether or not that's intentional. Either way, these character models are run-of-the-mill for a 2007 PS2 release, if not lesser. I just always find myself wishing the gameplay was enough to solidify the experience as a whole. What starts off as a funny game of golf with Aqua Teen characters attached to it turns into a drag by the time you're past level 6, be it from trying to keep up with the ball or the overly extended combat that feels like it goes on for way too long. It's a good thing this game is only 12 levels long, but even then there's a lot to be desired. I first thought my real means of adjustment would be the winds that affect my swings, which, you know, is common sense for games like this. However, that doesn't seem to matter no matter what the level indicates. Instead, when levels put in hazards like these orange bullets surrounding the hole, which requires you to time your shot so you don't hit any of the bullets, and I'm sorry, how big is that hurt box? This combined with the catch of going through what feels like a maze once Love Mummy takes away your mulligans, or this giant guessing game of which far gate is gonna take you to the hole, more often than not, you're gonna have a bad time, to put it lightly. The courses themselves look presentable for the time, and in the same breath would also make for some pretty good maps for Gmod or something. You got the Aqua Teen neighborhood as a tutorial level, but throughout the game you'll be golfing on the moon with the Moonanites in scenic Egypt featuring Love Mummy. We'll see some familiar sights in the background like Wongburger's Dick Ship or the Powerpuff Mall, and even at one point we'll be golfing in the depths of hell itself. I don't know if I should find this ironic or outright funny, but this is a thing apparently. And it's actually one of the harder stages in the game, appropriately enough. Even if it's bombarding you with enemies so much to the point where you have no room to breathe. This got really hectic, which I suppose is fitting given where we are. The worst of all these holes, however, is the one I played in level 8. The idea of Meatwad switching up the course to a sugar-coated Candyland sounds fine on paper. The level design itself, however, just rubs me the wrong way. There are times where I had no idea how to approach my shots. Spent a while positioning my meat cheat in the right spot in order to keep things moving, and just trying to shoot the ball over a gap this big took so many attempts that eventually left me with a score of triple sucky. Yeah, pretty charming there, guys. There's also what feels like a cryptic sequence of sorts where I got stuck trying to figure out how to get across this gap here, only for the game to tell me I had to shoot these specific turnip snipers in order to pass. I don't know whether or not I should find that clever or just confusing as all. Granted, I'm always shooting enemies as Frylock like a good chunk of the time, so this feels like a non-issue either way, but this instance felt so precise that I thought it was worth mentioning. I know golf isn't usually my thing, but I do know it shouldn't be this frustrating to get the ball over to the other side without having it land in the drink. I can handle a couple bogeys here and there due to bullshit hazards and whatnot, but in this case, when most of the trouble I had in this level is making simple navigation options, that's a really big problem. However, I feel there's another part of the game that's much worse than this. My least favorite thing about this game are the levels where you race against the frat aliens. You'll recall these guys from a season 2 episode where they crash in and ultimately get wasted. One of them leaves the other behind. Yeah. These guys will show up once in a while to taunt you into driving them in a race around the hole you're playing, which doesn't sound too bad until you actually play them. The goal is to race around the hole following these rainbow patterns that help guide your way around. You'll pick up power-ups that give you a boost of speed or help you shoot at the frat aliens if they're ever giving you trouble, which you'll need as many as you can get for reasons we'll get into. I'm just gonna say it right now, these are undoubtedly some of the stiffest vehicle controls I have ever played, and as someone who enjoys racing, either as side content or a full-fledged kart racer, playing these races are awkward as all hell and are hard to get a good grip on. In fact, it's almost the same problem I ran into with Royal Ransom, where the vehicle controls were so goddamn slippery that it made turning and especially going off ramps the biggest pain in my ass imaginable. This feels somewhat better by comparison, though I'd argue that turning with this 3-man golf cart is still a major accident waiting to happen. This is especially noticeable if you jump off a hill and start careening all over the place, or worse yet, get attacked from behind by the frat aliens as they're closing in on you, causing you to get into positions that ultimately throw you for a loop. Adding on to this, there are 3 different levels based around this. Once after the Fargate course, again on perhaps the worst map in the entire game, and one last time on the moon. Thankfully, I can say the second of these races is perhaps the easiest of the lot, as attacking them from the very beginning meant I basically won without even trying. Now compare this instance of dumb luck to the other 2 races, where these guys were practically on my tail the entire time. The last race in particular really highlights just how finicky these controls are. I was slipping up a number of times during this, and I still managed to win by the skin of my teeth. This probably goes without saying, but this was not fun in the slightest, and I dread every time they're on screen telling me this was coming up. I did not enjoy any of these 3 races whatsoever. Oh yeah, there's also this weird minigame in the final level where you guide the Aqua teams safely one by one. To give you a good idea, it kind of feels like playing Frogger. You keep your eye on the road, look for an opening, and move your character just before a car runs you over. It's a cool distraction, but that's about all I can say in its favor. And if you're wondering as to how your score affects the game, if you're expecting the ending to be based on how well you performed, I'm sorry to tell you that it ultimately doesn't really matter so much in the grand scheme of things. You could be the worst golfer ever, like I am, and the ending will still play out the same no matter what. In which case, yeah, in traditional Aqua Teen fashion, Shake dies in the end, as the show is so fond of doing, this time by means of Mortal Kombat.
Finish him!
Who was that guy?
Fatality.
In case you needed a good reminder as to who published this. At the end of it all, Zombie Ninja Pro-Am doesn't really rock the boat so well with me. The cutscenes are great fun to watch, and I love how the same writing team is on board to present these characters as we've always known them, but that's about as far as the positives go. As an actual game, however, it's perhaps below average at best and a tedious waste of time at worst. The golfing's about as basic as you can get, with everything else in between this being so drawn out that it wears so thin on you. The combat really boils down to attack some enemies, then get back to where you left off, or maybe find some collectible items hidden off the beaten path. The racing in this game is some of the flimsiest ever, and what all this boils down to, Aqua Teen Hunger Force Zombie Ninja Pro-Am is just another shameless tie-in game that has the heart and feel of the show, but the gameplay is an underwhelming mess on top of it all. If you really want to check this game out at least once, then proceed with caution, I guess. It's only 12 levels long, but half of these are sprinkled with some of the weaker aspects of video gaming I've ever played. But otherwise, I'd recommend just watching the cutscenes, as they're the only redeeming factor of this otherwise shoddy piece of work that is this game. Thank you ever so much for watching. This is Dan signing out. I'll see you in the next video. Take care.